Okay, so we are continuing Pirkei Avos, Perek Beis, Mishneh Tes. So up to this point, we had Hillel Hazaken, and Hillel Hazaken had 80 students, 80 Talmidim, who were all Gedolim in the Klal Yisrael. And very interesting, the Gemara actually divides them into three different categories of Hillel's Talmidim. He says like this: from the 80 Talmidim that I had, 30 of them were so great that just like Moshe Rabbeinu had the Shechina, they were so great in Torah that they were also worthy that the Shechina should rest on them. That was the Talmidim of Hillel Zaken. That's how great these Tanoim were. These were unbelievable people who had plumbed the depth of Torah to the extent that they were able to actually enjoy the Shechina's presence. That was 30%. The next 30%, he says, were one was the Shechina. I'm trying to remember what he says, and the other one he says they were just as great as Moshe Rabbeinu's Talmud, Yeshua ben Nun, and Yeshua ben Nun had through Koyach HaTorah and from the Rebbeinu Shalom giving him this power that the Tanakh says that the sun stayed standing for a day, didn't move, didn't rest, didn't descend, go down so the night should come earlier until he finished what he was doing. It's a whole story in Tanakh. That's how great Yeshua ben Nun was, who was the Talmud Muvak, so to speak, the exceptional Talmud of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Talmidim of Hillel, the next 30, which was one level lower than the Shechina, which would have been Moshe Rabbeinu, was like the Talmud of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's how great the Talmidim of Hillel were. And the last one, he says, he calls Beinanim. They were exceptional people, but compared to the first two, they were way lower in a level. Of course, way much greater than us, as you will see, because the Gemara says from those last 20, the youngest one and the one that was probably in the lowest level at that point was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Imagine Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, which we'll see in a few minutes, was one of the people who saved Klal Yisrael in Torah and in many, many different things. He's an intricate part of why Torah is today. And I'm going to start the Mishneh on Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, but just to explain how great Hillel was, that Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, the title was not Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, it's Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. It's like Moshe Rabbeinu. This title of Rabban is only given to the Nasiim that we had before all these Nasi. Now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was not a Nasi. He was not a descendant of Hillel and the Nasiim and Gamliel of Shimon. He was just a Gadol b'Torah b'Yisrael. In fact, he lived 120 years. The first 40 years, he was a businessman, but he learned Torah. And then the second 20 and 40 years, he learned and studied and grew in Torah when he learned with Hillel that 40 years. And the last 40 years was when he was a teacher. So he lived like Moshe Rabbeinu 120 years. And the Mishneh says like this, and I'll begin the Mishneh. It's Mishneh Tes in Perek Beis. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai kibel mehillel Shammai. He was makabel from Hillel and Shammai. So now, firstly, we know, as I mentioned many times, Hillel and Shammai were the Nasiim. One was the Nasi, one was the Rosh Hashiva. And Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, which was the Beis Medrash of Hillel and the Beis Medrash of Shammai, had constant arguments about halacha. And the halacha always remained according to Beis Hillel, except for a few places. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was makabel from both of them. Usually when somebody picks a Rebbe and especially such gedolim like Hillel and Shammai. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was a person that he understood you have to hear both sides of the story. And he was a very unique person for somebody that was a Talmud of just Hillel in a time when things started to change, and it was the first time that there were arguments on Torah, as I once mentioned before. But up to that point, whatever was learned was accepted, and there was never any argument from any of the Nesiim. Till the Beis Shammai and the Beis Hillel and Shammai themselves did not argue. It was the yeshivas, their students, that they were so much on a lower level, as I once mentioned. However, Yochanan ben Zakkai, I'm just going to say first the Mishneh. It's a short Mishneh. When Yochanan ben Zakkai says, Kibel Mehil Mishana, he was Mishamai, he was Makabel, he received a tradition from Hillel and Shammai, and Hu HaYomer. And this is what he used to say. This was somebody who was who learned for 40 years after he was a businessman for 40 years, and he learned as much as possible to reach a stage of the godless that he reached. And I'm going to explain to you how great he was. And he says like this, Im lamadata Torah harbe. If you learned as much Torah, just you devoted yourself completely to learning Torah, and you learned a lot of Torah. Al tarzik toiva liatzmacha ki lekach netzarta. Don't pat yourself on the back. Don't take so much credit for it, because that's why you were created. Now, in a simple form to say what this means is like this, because somebody to learn, sit and learning. We learn for half an hour in the morning, 3 times a week, and there are people who sit in yeshiva and they get there when they're supposed to on this Zman. They never miss a specific time frame, so they get there at 9 o'clock or 9:15, and they go for lunch at 1:15 or 1 or 1:30. And then they come back at 3, and there's an afternoon seder, and they're going until 6:30, 7 o'clock. And then they go home and eat supper, or they eat in the yeshiva, and then they have a night seder for 2 hours. And then they don't know. Sometimes they'll stay a bit longer, sometimes they'll stay more. But he's doing everything he's supposed to be doing, and he's growing in Torah, and he's not doing anything wrong. Says Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, forget about that guy. He gets a lot of schar, of course, in the Shemayim. But let's say he wakes up at 4:30 in the morning, and he learns throughout the whole day, and he achieves and he accomplishes and he does whatever he's supposed to be doing. Still, al tarzik toiva liatzmacha. Don't pat yourself on the back. Why? Ki lekach netzarta. The world, just for one shot, would be the world was created so that we should be makabel the Torah. The world was created. If we were makabel the Torah, as I mentioned many times, then the world will continue. And if the Klal Yisrael would have not been makabel the Torah, the Bnei Yisrael would have destroyed the world. In that case, you're not doing it. It's like you're paying a bill. You had a service, and then you pay the bill, and you want to pat yourself on the back. Don't pat yourself on the back that you're paying the bill. You got something for this. So the Bnei Yisrael is giving you all the wonderful things, and say even more. Even after it's said and done, the world was created. You have the opportunity to learn Torah. Would it be that somebody supports you? Or could it be that, Baruch Hashem, you're healthy? Or could it be that you have the wherewithal, the facilities, so to speak, the faculties to absorb the Torah? And you're doing it. Don't put yourself into. Don't make yourself such a big shot. Don't think you've done to create. Now let's remember, you are going to get schar for all of this, and the Rebbeinu Shalom requires that one of the mitzvahs in the Torah is that we're supposed to be learning Torah. But on the other hand, we can't think that whatever the Rebbeinu Shalom gives us is we're paying him back by learning Torah, and by learning Torah he's going to give us more. No, that's not what we have to think. We have to think the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us the Torah to study, and as much as you study, there's so much more to study, and there's so much more to know. And there's so much knowledge that we will never ever achieve or attain, that the Yochanan ben Zakkai is telling you, don't pat yourself on the back. Now I want to just tell you, first of all, when it came to godless Torah, the Gemara says, I think in Sukkah, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was of the smallest of the Talmidim of Hillel HaZaken, so he was proficient in every facet of Tanakh. He knew it backwards and forwards. Tanakh, that's Torah and Nevi'im Ksuvim. He knew Dikduk in Torah and Nevi'im Ksuvim perfectly, exactly everything that had to be the way it was supposed to be written. He knew Shas, Shisha Sidrei Mishneh. He knew everything that had to be known about Shas. He knew halacha. The Gemara lists all of this. The Gemara lists all of this. The Gemara lists, he knew halacha, he knew halacha, every halacha that was supposed to be known. He knew Agada. Agada is, the Gemara says many places, brings down specific, like I'll and bring a story, a medrash or something like that. He knew every single medrash that was at that time known. He knew it. Now, interesting enough, even better yet, he reached such a level that he knew Sichas Malachas Malchei Asharis. He knew he could understand when the Malachim was speaking. He understood their language. They speak a whole different form of language up in Shemayim, and he understood it. Even the fact that he even heard it, but that he understood it. He knew the Sicha, the language of Shadim. Shadim were created. Why they were created, Shadim, Gemara has different purposes, but it's something that people, he knew the language of animals. So it goes on and on, by the way. It just continues all those things that he knew. He knew Mishalom. The Gemara just doesn't say it about anybody. This is a Pirkei and Zakkai. Yet, on top of all this knowledge that he knew, he says, I will not even for 1 second pat myself on the back and do what many people will do, and they say, "Oh, I feel really, really good because I look at me. I learned for 9 straight hours." No, never. That's what you were supposed to be doing. You're doing something. You're paying a bill. You're repaying a bill for something that you got. You got some bread. You got to pay the storekeeper for the bread, and he's repaying the Rosh Shlim. And it's not even close to the repayment. That's what he's saying. It's only to take it close as the repayment. Now, let me tell you a little more about the history of Pirkei and Zakkai and why he saved Klal Yisrael. Pirkei and Zakkai was in the time of Vespasian, and Vespasian was the father of Titus. And Titus was the one that destroyed, in the Chodesh. Soon that we'll have an Av, and Shivas Thomas is coming up. He was in Yerushalayim. He came to Yerushalayim to learn. And the Gemara says, and we're going to see in a few minutes, it says he had 5 Talmidim, which is all the Mefarshim ask, what do you mean he had 5 Talmidim? It says that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai used to give Torah, he used to say Torah. He said it towards the walls of Yerushalayim outside, because there was no house in Yerushalayim that was capable of having such massive crowds. In fact, the shadow of the walls of Yerushalayim used to protect the people from the sun, because during the summer months it's very, very hot. And that had thousands of people. The dust of the people who left the shir was literally made a cloud in the sky and covered the sun. That's how many people came to Pirkei and Zakkai to hear Torah. And he was, at that time, there was a big problem. The Romans they first came down the Galil, came up from the start in the Galil, and they were very vicious already at that time. This was before the Churban. They destroyed many. The Galil was very wealthy. They killed everybody. They took everything, all the money, and literally they sold 40,000 slaves from up there, and they killed 12,500 older people. And there was many. It was a destruction, pure destruction. And as they kept coming down to Yerushalayim, and for some reason, Vespasian, he was a general at that time. Nero was the king, was the Caesar of Rome at the time, and he came down to Yerushalayim. And what was happening was the youngsters, the young hot-blooded guys, they wanted to fight. They wanted to be like Yehuda Maccabee and his followers. And so they thought, we can take them on. They're hot-blooded. And Yochanan ben Zakkai saw there's no chance. These people had absolutely no chance. He said, if they're going to start fighting, the Yerushalayim will get destroyed, and everything will fall apart. But they didn't listen to him. They didn't listen to him, and as the Romans reached Yerushalayim, they gave them a very hard time. These youngsters, they were soldiers as well, but they wanted to protect it. They were doing it for the good. But at the end of the day, if the Doilim in Yerushalayim said, don't do it, it's better to live under somebody else, the Romans, and pay taxes and listen to their rules than be your own thing. If the reverse would be that the Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash would get destroyed. They didn't listen. They said, we can do it. But Yochanan ben Zakkai realized they're not following the young people tend to be smarter than the older people if they think so. So what they did was, he was older at the time, and he let out they let out this was a plan. They let out a shmiya, a proclamation that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai passed away, and he wanted to be buried. You don't bury anybody in Yerushalayim itself. You have to be buried outside of Yerushalayim. All these basic kvaros are as outside the walls of Yerushalayim. So he only his a couple of trusted people knew that he was still alive, and they put him into a coffin. And they got to the walls of Yerushalayim, and the Romans were there, and they said, "What's going on here?" He says, "We have a funeral, the great Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and please let us out." And they said, "Fine." For this, they let him out. So they let him out, and he gets outside. And as they're taking him outside, they said they want to speak to the Vespasian, who was the general at that time. And the general says, "Well, what's going on?" He says, "The leader of the Jews wants to speak with you." And then he gets out of the coffin, and he speaks. And first of all, he bows down to Vespasian, and he says, "Welcome, King." And he says, "What do you mean, welcome, King? What you're doing is saying is wrong. Either I'm a king or I'm not a king. I'm not a king. I'm a general. If you say welcome, King, then you deserve to be dead because you're moirid b'malchus, like you're just denigrating the actual king. And if I am king, then why didn't you come earlier?" And she says, "No." And at that point, a messenger came from Rome and just crowned him king while he was talking to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So Vespasian saw that this man was somebody special and a holy person, obviously. And he said, listen to what he has to say. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said like this. And he told him what's going on. He said, the people inside there, they're going to fight you. They're going to fight you. And I know that you are very, very, very powerful. He says, please, one thing, give Klal Yisrael one thing. Give us Yavna. Yavna is a city up north in Eretz Yisrael. And Yavna, in the surrounding area, we'd like to set up a yeshiva over there. And I'm willing to give up Yerushalayim, which is unbelievable that he said that he had the koyach to say that. But he saw that through that way is the only way he's going to save Klal Yisrael. And being that he told him that he's king before he even knew that he was king, he realized he should give him something so that he deserved the present. And this was the present. The present was that he got Yavna. Yavna saved Klal Yisrael. The Sanhedrin moved from Yerushalayim to Yavna. The Sanhedrin were the leaders of Klal Yisrael when it came to halacha and anything that had to do in spiritual things. And they went to Yavna, the whole Sanhedrin. And then, of course, unfortunately, the Churban happened. And Klal Yisrael was saved in Yavna because he opened the yeshiva in Yavna and he was teaching there. Now, why was he the Rebbe there? Because we had this Rabbi Gamliel and Reb Shimon was before the Nesiim. Now, the Reb Shimon was murdered by the Romans because he taught Torah. And the Rabbi Gamliel ran away. The Nasi, he would have been the successor. So this is Rabbi Gamliel II. And Rabbi Gamliel ran away, and he found there was nobody to lead. And so as we learned earlier, this is Hill speaking. This is his Rebbe. And he realized, if I don't do anything, then I'm going to the Klal Yisrael. I have to become the, so to speak, Nasi. He wasn't the Nasi. He was the Rebbe. He was the leader. That's why they called him Rabbi Gamliel, because he was also instituted 9 different takonis in Yavna. But he never thought of himself. After all that, he was al tachzik toivel atzmach. Now, one of the pshatim al tachzik toivel atzmacha is like this. And this was a story where somebody was, his father passed away, and he went to one of the Gedolim, Chazanish. He went to the Chazanish, and he asked the Chazanish, what would be he was a koil man, and he was a serious learner, and Chazanish knew that, and he respected his learning, and he asked him, what could I do so that my father, I should give an aliyas neshama for my father. I know I could learn the schus, but give me something a little bit more that I would do. So he dashed in this pasuk. Im lamadata Torah harbe. You, as a younger man, you're a young man. You sit in the base medrash and you learned a lot of Torah, and you're still learning a lot of Torah. Al tachzik toiva le'atzmacha. Don't keep that wonderful thing, the Torah, the good thing that you have. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Take a young man who you see needs a little help and learn with him. And if you're going to do that, you're going to see that you, as we said once before, he learned from his Talmud even more than he learned from himself and from his Rebbeim. You're going to grow in Torah, and also the other person is going to grow in Torah. And that's going to be a greater nachas for the neshama of your father. So al tarsik toiva, don't keep that toiva. It's another form of way to learn this Mishnah. La'atzimcha, to yourself, rather give it out. Become a Rebbe for whoever needs it. And that's exactly what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai did. But he didn't feel as if he deserved any extra credit for that. He took literally that b'makom she'ein ish, hishtadel liyas ish. There was a great Rebbe, Rebbe Zishim Napoleon. He was tremendous honor, and he was traveling. They used to go traveling in different places of Klal Yisrael before he was known to who he was. Excuse me. And people didn't know who he was, but he did it so that he should not enjoy this earth. He said to experience different experiences, but also to that he shouldn't have too much pleasure, so to speak. And people, the Gedolim of many years back used to do that. They put themselves in gullus. This was the way it was. Gullus is a form of punishment for yourself, even though you don't deserve it. But if you should have done something, it also makes you grow. That's something that is difficult. You get above it, you grow from that. And he wanted to grow from that. So one day he gets into this town, and he stops off in an inn. And in this inn, there was a wedding. And he hears that there's a wedding at this inn. So he says he's going to go stop for a minute to see what this wedding was about. And he goes down to the wedding. And he says, he sees that everybody's crying at a wedding. So he's thinking to himself, what's going on? So it turns out this was the wedding of the child of an almana, the daughter of an almana. And this almana was promised for the chassan 300 ruble, which is an enormous amount of money. And she saved it. Apparently, she must have had it maybe she left over from her husband, that her husband, Yerusha, or she was able to gather it. And, she gathered 300 ruble, and she was supposed to give it to the chassan. She says, I'm on my way to the wedding, and I get to the wedding, and the money disappeared. I don't know what happened. I lost the money. I don't know what the story is. And the chassan says, I'm sorry, I was promised it, and if I'm not getting it, I'm not going to the chuppah. I mean, interesting, but that's the story. So he is listening to this whole whatchamacallit, and it happened to be he came from his Rebbe, who I don't remember who it was, and his Rebbe had given him 300 ruble because he himself had to marry off his daughter and other children, and so he had 300 rubles with him. So he goes over to the thing and he says, "I found the 300 ruble. I found it." So the everybody gets excited. Oh, at Tzaddik, he found 300 rubles, is giving it back. So he says, could you tell me the breakdown of how the rubles were, so I should know if this is actually your 300 rubles? So the woman knew exactly the breakdown of which is $100 bills, which were $50 bills, and he goes back and he says, give me a half an hour, I want to check it out. He goes back to his room and he runs quickly to a money changer and he does it exactly the way it was, and he comes back and says, it's true, it's your money. He says, I got your money. It's exactly the breakdown as it is. He says, but I want a reward. I'm not giving you the money until I get a reward. Oh, what are you talking about? I mean, the guy didn't look like he would feed Chashavas Aved is a mitzvah. That's enough of a reward. How is it? Okay, so they figured, all right, what is going to give him 5 rubles? He was a poor man. He looked like a poor person. He was a poor person. And he said, no, I want 25 rubles. 25 rubles is an enormous amount of money. It could feed you for a little while. So everybody got very upset and started berating him. And so, what are you talking about? Somebody who looks like you, and they also knew that somebody recognized that he was a Talmud of this and this Rebbe. And he said, your Rebbe would be embarrassed for what you're doing. What are you doing, Rebbe? How could you even think of taking you're supposed to be a person and you want a 25 ruble reward for this? So he says, I'm not giving you the money unless I'm promised 25 rubles. So the young guys in the shul said, and so he had the money in his hand. They pick him up, they take the money from him, and they throw him out of the thing. And Stephen got spit on, and he had charpis and bishas. He was totally embarrassed. So sure enough, and then he leaves. 2 weeks later, happened to be that his Rebbe comes to this town. And the Rebbe of the town says, "Oh, you were here?" He says, "You know what happened over here?" He said, "I don't understand. This is Reb Zisha. I know he's one of your Talmudim. He's supposed to be a special person." And he tells him the whole story. Now, the Rebbe knew that he had 300 rubles that he gave him. So he knew right away from the first second that this was not his 300 rubles, her 300 rubles, Almana's 300 rubles. He did this purely. The reason why he did this and why he wanted to get embarrassed and why he wanted to get the carpets and bushes, because he knew, and the Rebbe knew the godless of Reb Zisha. Later, it turned out he was, he knew that he would possibly, the Yetzer Hara would say, "Do you see what you did for this fellow? Just don't you feel good about yourself? It was a worthwhile trip. You did so much for this almana. You made everybody so happy. He didn't want this to happen. He didn't want to have that credit. He wanted the full credit of the tzedakah in Olam HaEmes." And so this is part of what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the godless of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was. He did so much for Klal Yisrael. There's so much more you can speak of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's history and what he accomplished in Klal Yisrael. In fact, the last thing I'm going to say is, after Rabbi Gamliel was able to come back, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai stepped down from his position as Rosh Yeshiva in Yavne, and he said, "You are the Nasi, and I'm giving it to you." He didn't want the power. I only did it to teach. And he gave him Gamliel the Rosh Yeshiva shaft, so to speak. And not only that, he left with some of his Talmidim to a completely different city, somewhere completely south, I think it's Hadera or something. He went, it's Ber Cholol, it was called. It's still actually, it's a city today. And he left because he didn't want to even infringe it. Maybe somebody's going to say, he was bad. No. He's the Nasi. We have a Rosh Yeshiva. Let him take his job back. And this was the godless of Yochanan ben Zakkai. So b'schus that, and also I want to say b'schus, there's somebody who's taking a very serious test today, Hanalei Basara. Hopefully they'll find nothing that they say maybe, possibly yes. And she's not well in the first place. So Hashem should give her a refuah Yeshua b'schus the learning of our Torah that we have right now. Thank you and have a very good day.